when I've interviewed people in the past and when I share, feedback with different hiring managers that ask for athletes or want to hire athletes, I always tell them, ask the athlete if they were the most athletic player on their team. Ask them if they were the most
Mm-hmm.
gifted player on their team. And what that will tell you is if they were not the most athletic or not the most gifted, but they contributed, they probably really had to work to be there. Right. So
Mm,
if you're born 6'8", again, and you have a 40-inch vertical and you have minimal skills, right? And I'm using basketball as an example, or you're 6'8", 400 pounds, and you can move pretty good, and you're playing football, you may not have had to harness the skill development. You may not have had to work as hard as the guy that was 60 pounds lighter and 6 inches shorter, or the guy that didn't have the vertical, or the guy that wasn't 6'8", he was 6'3". So it's really understanding and unlocking from the athlete. Yeah, we know you had to go through these circumstances, whether it be getting up early, staying late, keeping your
yeah.
grades up, whatever. But did you have that extra piece where you had to actually be first in the gym, last to leave? Did you have to go the extra mile and eat a different way because your metabolism didn't burn like that guy's metabolism did, right? And if you can find that athlete, that's the athlete that I would want in my organization, because they've shown that not only could they have been gifted with some things, they went and worked and got some other things, right? They went and got some other skills outside of what they
Mm-hmm.
might have been blessed and gifted with. That would be my feedback for hiring athletes or being an athlete entrepreneur is what did you have to put in to make yourself even that much better?
You're listening to the Black to Business Podcast, an educational podcast providing Black entrepreneurs with the tools and resources to start and grow their businesses. We chat with vetted Black entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners as they provide tips and resources to help take your business to the next level. I'm your host, Monique T. Marshall. Welcome back to the Black to Business Podcast. I'm your host, Monique T. Marshall, if you're new here. And if you aren't new here, thank you so much for joining me again this week. Now, today's topic is so special because it's going to highlight a journey that you might be able to relate to. You see, most entrepreneurs have careers that they were invested in before actually creating their businesses. And sometimes you're moving into a completely new field. But regardless of all the differences, you have to follow that thing that you're passionate about. And today's guest, Darnell Jones, is a testament to making a successful transition, specifically from being a professional basketball player to starting 2 companies. Now, his journey was not easy, so today we're actually going to talk about harnessing the athletic mindset and transforming adversity into innovation in business, because we all know that you will deal with adversity in business, but what I think is unique is that you have to have that athletic mindset. Like, we know I'm not an athlete, but we know that athletes are relentless, especially professional athletes. So a little bit about Darnell is he's the founder of Power Hands, an athletic training sporting goods provider of performance-enhancing multi-sport training products. Power Hands products are used by youth and professional athletes in more than 58 countries, including professional organizations such as the NBA, NFL, MLB, WNBA, and others. By merging his love for sports and his interest in business, Darnell was able to create products he knew would be impactful for athletes. So in our discussion today, Darnell is going to share the core principles of determination, discipline, and resilience that he carried from the basketball court to entrepreneurship. He's also going to talk about how to deal with rejection and maintain unwavering focus during adversity. And he's going to give some tips on how to successfully promote your business and products. And we're also going to talk about what's needed to build your business if you don't have a blueprint. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode and you learned something new, please make sure that you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. So without further ado, let's dive in. Actually, before we jump into the episode, I have an exciting announcement to share with you. During the month of September, we are continuing our very popular Black Men Who Lead campaign and featuring some amazing Black businessmen on the podcast all month. We're also doing the same on our dedicated Instagram account at Black Men Who Lead, so make sure that you are following. In addition to this, we are taking our Black Men Who Lead panel on the road, and we are heading to Washington, D.C. on September 21st. We would love for you to join us if you're in the area as we conclude this year's topic on the DNA of a Black businessman. The Big Boss energy will be in the building, and this is a conversation that you don't want to miss. All things related to Black Men Who Lead and information about how to RSVP can be found at www.blackmenwholead.com. Okay, now back into the episode. Darnell, welcome to the Black to Business podcast. Excited to have you on the show, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, so we always like to, before we get into today's topic, which is about harnessing the athletic mindset, transforming adversity and innovation and in business, I want to talk about who you are. So introduce my audience to who you are. So if you could just share a little bit about who you are, what is it that you do in your business, and how you got where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Darnell Jones from Salt Lake City, Utah, currently residing in Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I'm a former athlete turned serial entrepreneur, and also own a public foundation that we do for different philanthropic efforts. My current company that we're here to, I think one of the companies we're going to talk about today is Power Hands, which is a human performance training products company. So we make human performance products, skill development training products, really the full gamut for whether it's just general fitness to sports specific or, just trying to get in a little bit better shape.
Love that. And thank you for sharing your background. So first, I want to talk about, of course, this is the Black to Business podcast, and people deal with adversity, especially when it comes to business. So I want to talk about adversity as a catalyst for innovation and how you've kind of been able to do that. So can you talk about your experience? I know you were on Shark Tank and you had an accomplishment being filmed on there. And I want to talk about how that impacted your entrepreneurial journey and talk about how Tux and where you are with that brand today.
Yeah, so man, I'll go back a little further, but growing up, just being an athlete and playing different sports, I was fortunate enough to play college basketball, but I played really every sport growing up, from basketball, football, golf, you name it. And I got to my collegiate career, never really had any injuries, and in my collegiate career, I ended up having 5 knee surgeries over 3 years.
Wow.
And so, having to kind of deal with that adversity of like the unknowing of not knowing if I'd ever get to fulfill my dream of playing professional basketball, or not even being able to finish out my collegiate career. There was just a lot of adversity kind of, coming back from those injuries. And then my grandfather, who was like a father figure, and then my father both fell ill my senior year in college. And, I was back and forth from school to Salt Lake City, where I'm from, taking care of them and working through their illnesses. And so, I had a lot of adversity even before I got to my first entrepreneurial venture, which was Tux. But, that experience on Shark Tank was great because it was, you had to be, very prepared. You were pitching to, investors that know what questions to ask, know what buttons to push, kind of know where to peel back the onion in certain places. And so if you weren't prepared, it would come to light pretty quickly. So the preparation needed going on that show, and being able to answer those questions and being familiar with the business from top to bottom. And, whether it's from the marketing standpoint or it's from a finance standpoint, you really had to be on top of your game. So I would say that from that standpoint, the whole process of Shark Tank was a great process to go through. And I think it was a great kind of catalyst for Power Hands, which is the venture that we started shortly after Tux.
Love it. And so you said, I had to write that, 5 knee surgery. Oh my God. And I just want to talk more about your transitions from like an athlete to business. Like, how was that for you in making that decision?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the decision was kind of made for me, unfortunately. I had 5 knee surgeries over that 3-year period, but ended up having a 6th. And I remember vividly one of my coaches saying, "Hey, Darnell, you really should consider, if you want to be able to walk and play with your kids when you're in your 40s, you probably should consider, hanging them up. You've had a lot of surgeries and, it's hard on the body." And I just remember that conversation pretty vividly. And so I got invited, after college, I got invited to play for a team in the CBA, Continental Basketball Association, which at the time was one of the feeder leagues for the NBA as well as overseas. And I played in the CBA for a short period, had some pretty good games, and then got invited to the Sacramento Kings Summer League team. And there, obviously kind of had my chance to, to get to play with the big boys and kind of see where I was at. Although it didn't work out, I think with all the knee surgeries and what my body had been through, I knew that, there was probably a bigger, better journey for me out there. And so that was kind of an easier way for me to make that transition. But I think, making the transition to entrepreneurship was pretty easy because it was a new challenge. It was a new it was something I didn't know and I had to figure out. I had to, just like when I was playing basketball and had to practice and work on my game. As an entrepreneur, you got to work on your game. You got to understand terminology when it comes to fundraising. You got to understand terminology when it comes to marketing. You got to understand terminology when it comes to reading a profit and loss statement. And then you got to be able to carry those things out. So it was really just kind of shifting my, kind of drive and competitiveness from, sports to entrepreneurship. So the transition wasn't as hard for me as I think it is for others that kind of had their identity only in sports.
Yeah.
I felt like I always had a bigger place than just an athlete.
Yeah. Love that. And so, Darnell, how would you say like this shaped your mindset and your approach to business, like that transition? Because I think mindset is a big thing when sports, business, wherever. So for people who are listening, they sometimes may have that mindset battle. So for you, how were you able to shape that mindset as you approach business?
Yeah, I think, I took a lot of the core principles that I had when I was playing sports. It was, there
Mm-hmm.
was a determination. There was obviously a resiliency.
Right.
I wasn't always the most athletic player on the court. Matter of fact, I was hardly ever the most athletic player on the court. And,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't born talented and gifted. I had to work for everything that I had. And so there was a determination. There was a discipline, to get up early, to, get to the gym early, stay late. Um,
Yeah.
there was this discipline to be as good as I was because I got to a place, based on, the work that I put in, not, being 6'8" and having a 40-inch vertical. And so I took those things to the business world and took them, seriously, from the discipline of learning and understanding business to, getting mentors and having, business coaches, if you will. And then, of course, the resiliency that if someone told me no, that wasn't going to stop me from moving forward. And so I took a lot of core principles from being an athlete to entrepreneurship and things that I still have today. So
Hmm. That's so powerful. You said that. So on the Black to Business, we really speak to a lot of, new and first generation entrepreneurs. So for a lot of people, especially with social media, they're seeing this overnight success. But for some people, it just does not happen like that. It takes work, like you said, discipline, resilience. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it is a big part of it is at work. So thank you for sharing that.
absolutely.
And so with this transition, what were some of your biggest challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them to then create Power Hands?
I would say probably the first challenge was is that I didn't have a blueprint, right? There wasn't,
Hmm.
in playing sports, there's a blueprint. There was, okay, you got
Right.
a trainer, you got to eat this way. There's books on this. There's different things. The businesses that I've launched, from Tux to Power Hands, there was no blueprint. These were products that created their own market.
Right.
Basketball players, we never trained with gloves on. I mean, traditionally, right? That was not a thing. You didn't train with gloves on. That was So we really created a niche market that we had to figure out, how do we market this? How do we educate? How do we get this out to the atmosphere, right? And how do we do that on a budget, right?
Yeah.
Because we didn't have deep pockets like the big companies, the big marketing budgets they have. So we had to get very strategic and had to go through it that way. So I would say that was probably the biggest piece was just taking that.
Hmm. Now let's talk about from idea to innovation. So you have created this amazing brand, Power Hands. I want to talk about how you actually went about. You came up with the idea and then actually created it. Like, can you share with us that process from idea to actually creating?
Absolutely. Yeah. So growing up, I would, not being the most athletic kid, I would look at different training
Hmm.
methods and, I'd watch videos on guys back in the day like Pistol Pete and, Jason Williams, White Chocolate, who was, arguably the best ball handler in the NBA when I was coming up.
Hmm.
And I would just see, how are these guys training? What are they doing? I'd look at shooting videos and what have you. And so, kind of going through and identifying different training methods, I came across Jason Williams, and he, in an interview, he said he would dribble and pass with gloves on, and it made the ball slippery. And so, wow, I thought that was interesting. And so I started doing that, while I was training at, the young age, I don't know, somewhere in my teens. And then I started putting ankle weights on my wrist. And so
Mm.
there was kind of this combination of anaerobic, aerobic, weight resistance plus, decreased dexterity. So making it really, really hard during training. So then in the game, it's easy. And
Hmm.
so it's really kind of like, okay, so here's the idea. Um, Now, how do I make it better and how do I make it more applicable to the sport? And so instead of wearing ankle weights, we put the weight inside the tops on the top side of the glove, and then made the palm side of the glove, anti-grip or slippery. So I was accomplishing both areas as when I was training. But now it was, okay, well, how do we manufacture it, right? And then what colors does it need to be so that it stands out? And so my co-founder, Darnell Jones, we got into a room and kind of talked through different strategies on what colors we want it to be. And we went with black and gold. We figured, black with the gold speckle, that would be something that would stand out and wouldn't look like any other gloves, right? Instead of having red and blue and black and different colors that could get confused with being a Nike glove or an Under Armour glove or someone else's glove. We wanted ours to be unique and stand out. So, that was kind of the process of idea. Okay, we've got a design. Okay, now we've got to go to manufacturing. So, getting different samples back and tweaking it. And then, most important was just getting those samples in people's hands and asking for the negative feedback, right? It was everyone I sent them to. It wasn't tell me what you love about them. It was tell me what you don't like. I already think they're great. Tell me what's wrong with them. And so, getting feedback from enough people that would give you real and honest feedback, really help you create the best product. And that's what we did. And I think, the organic usage and the people that have used it have been uncompensated have really proved that we created a product that people love and enjoy, outside of having to be compensated or, promoting it for just some kind of reciprocal value,
And for you, one of the things you mentioned is, of course, not having the blueprint. So how was it like building this out in terms of, did you know people in the industry, or it was just like, I'm going to go for it and find out who I need to find out who handles this? And how did you kind of go about finding those networks that you needed?
Yeah. So, building it out, there was, like I said, there was no blueprint. So, there wasn't really anyone I could call on to say, hey, I'm creating this thing. Can you help me manufacture it? It was, get online, get some books on manufacturing, reach out to manufacturers and, go to the fabric store and grab different fabrics and it was really that process. And then it was, we manufactured everything overseas. So we'd send, kind of a mood board, if you will, that would have different fabrics and then where we'd want it placed and how much of each. And this had to be stretchy and that had to be stiff. And then weights had to be here and there'd be diagrams that we created. And then they would send us samples back and then we'd break those down and send another, kind of board back with the changes. And, it was just a great learning experience. It was a great process. I think at this point, creating something as unique as at least the gloves as with one of our products with Power Hands has made it very easy and simple to, help other entrepreneurs that have come to us with ideas and products to help manufacture and build out their products. But yeah, there was no blueprint. So it was really just kind of trial by error and just really great experience.
And for you as a leader, like how did you practice? Maybe was it patience during this process? Because I know sometimes a lot of people feel like they can get anxious. So for you, when things didn't work and you had to go back and change something, like how was that for you and how did you handle that as a leader?
Yeah, I have a quote and I've probably overused it. People that know me know that I overuse it, but there's a quote and I can't even tell you who it was by, but our coach would have us, as we were doing stretching before practice started, he would give us this piece of paper that had kind of what our practice was. And there'd always be a quote. And I remember one of the quotes was, nothing is so good or so bad that the mind does not make it that way. Right. And so essentially what that was saying is when you hit that game winning shot, it was great, but it wasn't as great as you thought it was. Right. When you failed that test, it was a big deal, but it wasn't as bad and as big of a deal as you thought it was. And so that's always really allowed me to stay a little balanced in terms of like when things don't go right or when things go really good. I'm pretty good at kind of staying balanced and not feeling like, okay, we just took over the world, but also the world didn't just crash down on me either. But then I think as an entrepreneur, I think there has to be a level of patience, if you will, because you don't have a lot of time, especially when you're building a brand and building a business. There's things have to get done and pretty quickly and in a timely fashion. So there has to be a balance of don't get too high, don't get too low, but also you can't coast. You got to get moving, you got to get on it because there's typically a window, right? And so you want to make sure that window isn't closed.
So good. That is so good. And speaking of like dealing with some of those challenges, can you talk about some of those initial challenges that you encountered when you were founding Power Hands and like how did you address those?
Yeah, I would say initial like major challenges was like the fundraising aspect, right? Fundraising is just an art in itself. and obviously there's statistics on just founders in general raising, different types of funds. But of course, Black founders,
Right.
significantly have a more difficult time raising funds. And so, beyond that, like I said, it's an art. So there's different levels to fundraising, right? There's your first round, which is kind of your family and friends. You
Mm-hmm.
pull together 10 or 15, $20,000 to kind of get some prototypes made. And then you got like the angel investor fundraise round, which is more, okay, we might need, 100,000, 200,000 from 10 different people. And then it's, okay, we've proven the concept, we've got revenue, and we're moving forward. And now it might be the venture capital stage, which is far more due diligence and an expectation to scale and grow, in a hurry. And then you've got the private equity. So there's these different stages of raising funds. And then there's this art that, you have to raise enough to get you to where you have to go, but then you have to raise a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more because everything always takes a little longer and costs a little more, right? And if you don't do
Right.
that and you hit this area of maybe a stagnant stage of maybe where you're not selling as much or what have you, well, you don't want to go into a fundraise when revenues are going down or there's some market shift or change, right? If you have a restaurant and you're going into COVID and all of a sudden restaurants are closing, it's going to be really hard to raise money for that restaurant. So if you haven't raised
Mm-hmm.
enough and had some reserves in place, well, your business could be out of business, and not because you're a bad entrepreneur, but because you didn't time it properly from a fundraise standpoint. So I would say the art of fundraising was
Mm-hmm.
the biggest challenge that we had with the business, because otherwise it was, we created a really good product and we had really good people behind it, and we didn't see a lot of challenges outside of fundraising. Yeah, I'd have to go with that one.
Mm. And how did you address them?
Again, it was you had to have resiliency, and you had
Mm-hmm.
to push through. I mean, you pitch to 100 people, you might get one that says yes. And so it's just being able to be told no and not
Mm-hmm.
give up on something that you believed in before you walked in the door. But that says a lot about what the business and the brand, the company you're building as well is if 100 people can tell you no and you give up, well, then you didn't believe in it and have enough faith in it to begin with, right? And so that's like a very, very, very important piece to, in my opinion, to someone starting a business is you got to believe in it enough that if 1,000 people tell you no, you still believe it's yes, right? Now,
Right.
again, do you want to be naive and think that, okay, if the market size is 10,000 people because you're selling products to referees or whatever, and people are telling you, hey, you probably shouldn't think this is going to be $1 billion business because you only got 10,000 people to sell your product to. That's being naive. But again, you want to make sure that if you believe in that vision and you're moving out with that vision, don't let people tell you it's not going to work. You got to push
Right.
through, and you got to be resilient, because most people will tell you it's not going to work, for that matter.
Yes, certainly true. And Darnell, one of the things you mentioned in the beginning is that you're a serial entrepreneur, and we spoke about your earlier business. So for you, how did you know Power Hands was the business to go with? And then how did you let the market tell you yes?
Yeah, so it was very interesting because I was still in Tux, the underwear company, which
Mm-hmm.
market size was huge, right? Market size is huge. I mean, that product could be sold, and the underwear were used to keep your shirt tucked in. So
Mm-hmm.
it could be someone in the service industry that works at a restaurant, or it could be someone in the military. It could be someone that just cares about their shirt being nice and neatly tucked into their suit. And we were very early on in the business. Actually, we were just going in to start raising money for it. We just finished the Shark Tank filming. We were going to raise money for Tux, and I had been training in the off season with some pro athletes, college and high school kids, and the feedback was like, "Man, these gloves are crazy. It's the hardest workout I've ever had, and I feel like my ball handling is getting way better, and yada yada yada." And I just sat and
Mm-hmm.
thought, there's pros and cons to having a big market size. The pro is obviously, yes, you can sell to a lot of people and obviously hopefully generate a lot of money. But the
Mm-hmm.
con is if you're not very focused on specifically that portion of the market you're going to sell to, you can kind of lose yourself because the market is so big and not really have a good kind of strategic vision on who you're going to attack in that market. And that could be the
Yeah.
downfall. And so I thought, my relationships are still pretty deep in the NBA space. And of course, now we sell to, every sport, but we started with basketball. But my relationships are still pretty fresh in the NBA, from players to coaches to trainers. And I thought, I could roll this product out. Social media influencers were really, getting hot, and basketball kind of trainers and influencers were amongst the top. And I thought, I think with Power Hands, I could probably take this product to market faster with less money. And the market size is still, huge. And so that was really the determining factor between kind of taking, do I go with Tux or do I go with Power Hands? And with Power Hands, it was those things that came to mind. It was market size, it was relationships in the space, and how I could take it to market, which was, social media marketing and influencers, which at that time they didn't charge and didn't cost as much as they do now. They've kind of carved out a nice place in the market for themselves, but we got in pretty early, so it was timing for us.
Timing, love it. And so one of the things you mentioned was the MBA also, and your background in relationships. So somebody is listening and they're like, well, he has all of these relationships. It's easier for him. But of course, the topic of today is how you faced a lot of adversity. So what would you say was there any moment that was a little bit surprising, or you thought it would be easier in some way and it wasn't?
Yeah, I think, like I said, basketball was one market that we pushed into. However, we play in several different markets, and, there's no doubt that relationships play a big factor, whether it's relationships, getting an advisor that's been in the space that you're going into, or it's having an influencer that has, a big following. But that's a very small portion of growing a business. You look at social media influencers, and while they may reach 10,000 people with a social media post or something on YouTube, those 10,000 people, that doesn't mean they're going to purchase, right? You've got to create a great product. You've got to make sure you're handling people's concerns. You got to make sure you're making adjustments to the products as they're giving you feedback. So there's a lot of adversity you're going to face. And like I said, fundraising, right? You can have the best product in the world, but if you don't have the money to get it out to the masses, it's only as good as it is sitting there on your kitchen table. So, certainly while we had relationships, we faced, just a lot of adversity from, we really pushed and started our marketing efforts on Facebook and Instagram, doing, different, social media influences. Well, Facebook changes the algorithms to force you to start paying for ads. And now where you may have been getting, a 10x return on your investment, you're now getting a 2.5 or 3 times return, because now you've got to pay, incrementally, or actually a lot more than you were paying before. And you've got to kind of change your strategy, or you go into COVID and you can't get products shipped from overseas because our products are coming from overseas. And so now you have the orders, but you can't fulfill the orders, or, the shipping cost to get your products to the States has now increased by 30 or 40%. So I'll tell you, I think any entrepreneur that's been in it long enough that hasn't said that there's been more adversity than, easy times, I would probably think they're not telling the truth. I would have to argue that for every win, there's 10, 20, 30 losses.
Right.
Obviously, we don't show those because it shows vulnerability, and sometimes that could affect your business. So the ones that do show the losses, I commend them. We showed a few of them, but yeah, there's adversity after adversity. So if you're getting to become an entrepreneur, every entrepreneur I know, we say the same thing. It's, you got to have a stomach for it. You got to be prepared for it. And, you got to be prepared to fail and get back on the horse and try again. Totally
agree. And so speaking of marketing strategies, so in all of this, what are some of those strategies that you have found to be the most effective in promoting your products and reaching your target audience?
Yeah, so without a doubt, it's organic nature. Organic. If someone is marketing and promoting your product and they don't organically like it or appreciate it, or they can't, give you word of mouth, support or what have you on your product, it's not going to work. Paying an athlete to promote your product and they don't actually use it, it's just, I would highly advise against it. And not only athletes, it could be anyone, an influencer, a celebrity. If they don't really use the product, don't really appreciate it, you'll be an uphill battle getting them to fulfill the agreement. It'll come across on video, whether it's YouTube or any other social outlet, that, it's not organic. And we've just had so much success where we weren't pushing and promoting a product, and we're not telling the consumer to go buy this product because it's ours. It's got to be their idea. You're putting it out there, but you're not giving them a call to action to say, go buy now. You're saying, here's what we have. Here's why it's great. If you're in the market for this is what I would recommend. This is what I use. Right. And you don't even have to be that direct, but I think the indirect organic promotion is the best promotion, in my opinion, there is.
Love that. And so you have successfully, of course, expanded Power Hands globally. So for someone who is listening and they're like, okay, I need some strategies. What strategies did you employ to connect with your customers from different cultures and regions?
Yeah, I think the internet nowadays has just made it so easy to take a product globally, right? I mean, you can get on Amazon and sell to several different countries. And so you don't have to really have
Yeah.
global distributors like you may have in the past. You could do it all online. There's 100 different marketplaces. I think, Alibaba might be the biggest international and global marketplace for selling and manufacturing products, right? So if you get
Yes.
on a platform like Alibaba, Etsy, you name it, eBay, all these platforms are pretty global now. So
Mm-hmm.
the bigger position I would take is as an entrepreneur is educate online, and then have those outlets available for people to purchase. And then, of course, if you can make the shipping affordable without beating up your margins, that always helps because shipping overseas is pretty expensive if you don't have some distribution or some kind of shipping outlet that reduces those prices for you.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, in all of this conversation, we're talking about harnessing the athletic mindset. And I wasn't athletic, but I could always tell people who were athletes growing up. I feel like you all have this different mindset. But I want to dive into that more because I do think it is helpful in business. So, as a former athlete, like how did your training, like in sports, cultivate this mindset for you of resilience and discipline that you now apply in business?
Yeah, so I would say, when I've interviewed people in the past and when I share, feedback with different hiring managers that ask for athletes or want to hire athletes, I always tell them, ask the athlete if they were the most athletic player on their team. Ask them if they were the most
Mm-hmm.
gifted player on their team. And what that will tell you is if they were not the most athletic or not the most gifted, but they contributed, they probably really had to work to be there. Right. So if you're born 6'8", again, and you have a 40-inch vertical and you have minimal skills, right? And I'm using basketball as an example, or you're 6'8", 400 pounds, and you can move pretty good, and you're playing football, you may not have had to harness the skill development. You may not have had to work as hard as the guy that was 60 pounds lighter and 6 inches shorter, or the guy that didn't have the vertical, or the guy that wasn't 6'8", he was 6'3". So it's really understanding and unlocking from the athlete. Yeah, we know you had to go through these circumstances, whether it be getting up early, staying late, keeping your
Yeah.
grades up, whatever. But did you have that extra piece where you had to actually be first in the gym, last to leave? Did you have to go the extra mile and eat a different way because your metabolism didn't burn like that guy's metabolism did, right? And if you can find that athlete, that's the athlete that I would want in my organization, because they've shown that not only could they have been gifted with some things, they went and worked and got some other things, right? They went and got some other skills outside of what they
Mm-hmm.
might have been blessed and gifted with. That would be my feedback for hiring athletes or being an athlete entrepreneur is what did you have to put in to make yourself even that much better?
Yeah, that's really good. So much perspective there. And it's like, now those are the things I'm going to look for. It's not just about being an athlete, it's what type of athlete you were. Love that.
Absolutely.
And so, Darnell, can you share maybe a time or an example of a challenging moment that you had in your entrepreneurial journey, and how did your athletic mindset help you navigate it?
Yeah, and like I said, it was I would say fundraising was the primary issue or difficulty or adversity I faced when it came in the entrepreneurial space. But it was the resiliency I had as an athlete. It was these surgeries I went through where I said,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm going to come back and play. I'm still good to play. I've got to finish school. There's different things. It was a resiliency to say I'm not going to give up. And it's the same when it came to entrepreneurship. When 100 investors said no,
Mm-hmm.
I had to go in the room with the 101st investor and say the same pitch and have the same confidence that I did with the first one. And that's a big piece because not a lot of people can be told no, right?
Yeah.
And be okay with that. A lot of times it starts chipping away at your confidence. And I'd say
Mm-hmm.
it chipped away at mine too, but I had just been told no and, had went through so much adversity prior to that it was almost kind of like it became a comfortable space for me. But that's
Mm-hmm.
not true for everyone else, right? If people, you live in this world where everyone can have an opinion, and if those opinions start
Mm-hmm.
to affect you in a negative way, that'll affect your business as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you said that because everybody can't deal with a no. And so, what advice would you give to someone to maintain that focus and determination in those times where they are facing that adversity and setbacks in their businesses?
Remember why you started. Um,
Mm-hmm.
remember where you come from, and just remember who you are. Like go back to the inner you, and just look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you're ready for it. You started it, right? God built
Mm-hmm.
you for it, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't supposed to be there. And I think for me, that's what's gotten me through is really just going back and saying, look, I'm built for this. This is, I've been told no 100 times, but they just haven't seen the vision that I saw. And I was committed to the vision. So I wasn't going to allow someone that didn't see my vision, allow that to be the outcome, right? I was going to write my story based on how I feel God put me in a position to write it, not how someone else was going to write it and I was going to follow their book.
Great advice. Now let's get into more of the work that you are doing with Power to Give. If you can share about your organization, Power to Give, and some of the things and programs that you are offering to underserved youth communities.
Yeah, so the Power to Give Foundation was something Danielle and I, started the day we started the business. So we started it as an initiative to begin with, but we, both of us came from very humble beginnings, and always felt like giving back was just as important as obviously growing a business and generating, revenue. And so the very first day that we made $1, we vowed to communities and to kids, and whether it be focused on athletics and academics, handed that to the neurodiverse space, helping with kids that may be faced with different neurodiverse circumstances like autism, any neurodiverse space. We have a 6-year-old son, Harper Jazz, who's just amazing, but he's on the autism spectrum, and it was something that was important to us. But we've done a lot. We've worked with, Boys and Girls Clubs, and we've worked with, big organizations like the NBA, NFL, NFLPA. And it's really all about giving back. It's really all about making sure that if kids, keep up with academics, that they can participate in sports, and finance is not going to be the reason they can't play. So whether that's needing shoes, or if it's a team needing jerseys, or it's needing referees for games, it's really focused around that. We just didn't want to leave any kids behind when it came to sports. It's just because we realized and knew how, especially me, realized and knew how important sports was to my development as a person, from being coachable to being a teammate and creating a network based on relationships as an athlete and relationships that brought me. And so that was really the focus, was academics, athletics. And like I said, now we've just added partnering with a group called the Neuro Discovery Center of North Texas, which is focused on kids and people with neurodiverse circumstances.
Love that. And so for those who are listening who do want to support your mission and initiatives, how could they contribute or get involved?
Yeah, so powerhands.com. We've got a link to the Power to Give Foundation on there, as well as, of course, Power Hands. We've got all social platforms, whether it's YouTube or TikTok or Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, follow us on there. Send us a message if you know of anyone that may need some assistance, whether it be from training product standpoint and what have you. We're always open to helping out underserved, and yeah, we're just looking forward to continue to make an impact where we can.
Love it. And Darnell, as someone who has experienced both the highs and the lows of entrepreneurship, what advice would you give for aspiring Black entrepreneurs who are just starting out on their journey?
Don't be discouraged. Of course, there's information that it's, significantly harder for us to build businesses, get funding, what have you, but that's just a roadblock. You can't allow that to be your reality. You can't allow that to be the narrative. You have to push through and figure it out, right? And get a mentor, get an advisor, get someone that has been in the space that you're going into. And it's so much easier today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? You get on, identify the person that's been in the space that you're going into, and reach out to them and tell them you'll come and do some work for free in your free time, or you'll bring value in some way that you can bring value to them. And in return, you just want guidance and feedback, and, kind of build your mentorship or your team from that standpoint, and they'll point you in the right direction. But again, don't be discouraged and be resilient.
Great advice. And speaking of mentors, in your own journey as an entrepreneur, have there been any mentors or individuals who have played a significant role in guiding you along the way? And if you could share how mentorship has impacted your growth and success.
Yeah, I've got a group of kind of mentors and advisors that I lean on pretty heavily, and it can depend on the market, or it could depend on what I'm wanting to have the discussion about. But
right.
One that started me off early in my career, his name was Mike Brown. And again, as I talk about sports with networking and relationships, I played high school basketball with Mike's son at Cottonwood High School in Salt Lake City, and when I got done playing ball professionally, I ran into his son and had a conversation, and he asked me what I was doing next in terms of, business and what have you. And, I told him I was kind of just, figuring it out. And he said, you should meet with my dad. And 7 years later, a week later, I ended up meeting with his dad. And 7 years later, I went through, three different companies working with his dad in the medical device space, and
Wow.
had a bunch of exits. And he taught me a lot and let me, really sit at the table and understand how some of these deals and negotiations took place to acquire companies. And I'm forever grateful for him kind of starting me off in my career, because he
Mm-hmm.
really sparked my entrepreneurial passion, by seeing him and the different companies he was, starting and selling and running. And I'm just forever grateful for him. But yeah, I continue to have mentors and advisors in different spaces. And, I attribute a lot of my sanity as an entrepreneur to having those advisors and mentors to lean on when things get rough, and obviously when
Mm-hmm.
things are going good, to lean on as well.
Yes. Love that. Love that. So we know that innovation is at the core of Power Hands. So can you give us a sneak peek into any upcoming product launches or new developments that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I think right now with Power Hands, we've always been, really really heavy on the innovation side. I think right now it's of course continuing innovation, whether it be connecting with different technologies to continue to measure inputs or outputs, as far as like performance. But I think it's really tightening the business and making sure that we're going deep with our customer base,
Mm-hmm.
versus going wide. It's how do we go deeper? How do we provide more value? Whether that's more education, whether that's more training, whether that's classes. It's really how do we go deeper with our current customer base. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's really really our focus right now. But we're also doing some co-branded lines. We have a partnership that we signed with LaMelo Ball, that he has his own line.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking to do that with some other athletes here in the near future that we're hoping to announce here in the next little while.
Love it. And so, Darnell, in all of this, as the leader of the organization, like how do you stay on top of things? How do you stay organized? Are there any favorite tools or resources that you use?
Yeah, so I went to a year of junior college in Utah Valley, and there was a gentleman named Franklin Covey, who wrote a book called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he uses in there was the four quadrants. And so the
Mm-hmm.
four quadrants is, urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And so when you put those in the quadrant, if it's urgent, important, it needs to happen now. If it's not urgent, not important, it can wait till later. And so
Mm-hmm.
that has really, really helped me kind of identify, okay, I've got 100 things on my plate to get done. What has to be
Right.
done today? What has to get done by tomorrow? What has to be done in the next 6 months? And then I
Mm-hmm.
can really kind of work that way versus kind of, just saying, I'm going to get this done and that done, this done. Well, oh, there's a deadline for that I missed. But I'd say that four quadrants from the book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, has been really my go-to for organization and kind of keeping up with all my to-dos.
Love it. And in this journey, what has been the best risk that you've taken?
I think just getting started. I think,
Mm-hmm.
I could have certainly, talked myself out of it multiple times with Tux and with Power Hands, and just said, hey, I'm just gonna have a regular job and just do what I want to do, and just, clock in and clock out and play it
Mm-hmm.
safe. And I think, both of those businesses have brought so much to my life and to our family's life in terms of relationship, networking, information. I mean, you name it, impact. I would say it was just getting started. I would just say the risk of actually jumping out there and saying, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move forward and I'm going to do it. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to allow a couple no's stop me from doing it. And when times get rough, I'm going to bite down and continue pushing forward. But yeah, I would say getting started.
Love it. Darnell, this has been amazing. And I just want to end it off with some not so serious business questions. It's a little
Okay.
fun. So, first question is, what's the most random social media account you follow?
Oh, wow. The most random social media account I follow.
Uh-huh.
Probably the Shade Room. And I don't even know why I follow that account. I don't even know why I follow. To be honest, I don't know. I
Okay.
think maybe I saw something one day and I clicked it and thought, oh, that's funny. But probably the Shade Room is probably the most
The
random one.
shadow. Okay. Yeah. They have some interesting stuff there sometimes. Yeah. I can see
Okay.
that.
All right.
Okay. And so, can you share a funny or embarrassing business related moment that you've experienced?
A funny business moment that I've experienced. Mm. Man, I'm sure there's been a bunch. I got one. I got one. It was probably the first year of business, our first year in our business, maybe our second year, and we
Mm-hmm.
decided to branch off with a new product in the football space. And
Mm-hmm.
and I was super excited about it. The gloves were really, really sticky. We don't sell the gloves anymore, obviously, but they were very sticky gloves. They were weighted, and we thought, man, this is going to be great for the football space. And so there was a couple agents that had reached out about working with players, and we've got a product for. And so I sent over maybe 10 pairs of these gloves. They were called the Extreme Grip gloves, and like I said, they were super sticky, tacky gloves. And we were sending them to a wide receiver. And I can see his face. He played for the Chargers, and I cannot. Keenan Allen was his name. And so we sent him to the agent, and like a week later, the agent sends me pictures, and literally like 4 pairs of the gloves that Keenan had were just shredded. The weight was so heavy on the top side of the glove, which was so sticky, that the laces on the football were tearing through the gloves. It looked like Wolverine had taken his hand and like slashed through like all 4 or 5 pairs of the gloves we sent him. And it was like the first portion of feedback that we ever got, but we were like going to roll out and launch it. We thought, no, these work. These are great. And, putting it with a high performance athlete like him and having a real quarterback throwing it, shredded him. And so it was just kind of like, kind of tucked our tail like, well, I guess we're not going to roll out with him or that product. But that was probably the most embarrassing time, is we just didn't have enough time to get enough feedback, and probably a mistake on my side. But we got that feedback pretty quick.
Wow. I forget. Okay. And if your business had a theme song that played every time you entered the room, what would that song be and why?
If we had a theme song, wow, that's a good one. That is a good one.
I know you got some good songs. You follow the Shade Room. I know you got some good songs.
Yeah. Man, I swear there's a Waka Flocka song. Man, I can't think of the name. But put it like this. It would be a Waka Flocka theme song, that's for sure. I'd have to go back. It'd be something with some energy, that's for sure.
Yes. Waka does have the energy. I love him on Pandora. Love it. Okay.
Or you know what? I'll go with this. I'd say I'm going to switch it. I'm going to tell you what it'd be. It'd be Drake's Back to Back. That's what it would be.
Okay. Back to back. The deals. I love it.
Yeah. Back to back.
Okay. And finally, what does it mean to you to be Black in business?
That's a really good question. I haven't really identified it as I never really identified it as anything. I would say the appreciation that I have for being Black in business is that other young African-American kids can look at me and say, I can also start a business, right? Not that I'm on this pedestal, this platform that I've, I'm not, the likes of, the bigger, Black executives, but if they could look at me and say, hey, he did it, whether it's on a small scale or medium scale, but he actually did it. Yeah. That's where I think it means a lot for me, is just being someone for them to look at and say, there's an example of someone that can do it, so I can do it too.
Yes, that's beautiful. And Darnell, people are listening. They're going to want to know, how can they find you, stay connected with you, and support you? So please do share.
Yeah, so powerhands.com. Like I said, we've also got the social channels. We respond to all DMs. Send us a DM, reach out, let us know how we can be helpful. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So Darnell Jones on LinkedIn.
Love it. And we'll be sure to put those in the show notes. Darnell, thank you again for being on the Black to Business podcast and all of the amazing work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And you guys keep going. I love what you're doing.
And that brings us to the end of another amazing conversation with Darnell. Such a powerful conversation, and him teaching us how to take control of those difficult situations and have that athletic mindset in the midst of adversity. So before we wrap up, I want to go over a few takeaways from this episode. So Darnell took us through his journey creating Power Hands and how his basketball career influenced him as an entrepreneur. He was able to apply resilience, determination, and discipline to building a business. Because of his athletic perspective, Darnell mentioned recognizing people who have to put in the work to get to where everyone else is, as it shows work ethic and drive. And I love that he spoke about that, because it doesn't happen overnight for everyone, and some people have to work a little bit harder. That doesn't mean that you won't reach success. Darnell also emphasized that it's essential to be flexible and patient when making products. I love he shared his personal experience with the increase of shipping costs and the start of paid advertisements on social media. While these were bumps in the road for him, Darnell was able to navigate them with the help of his team and also his mentors. To learn more about Darnell and Power Hands or the resources that he mentioned, be sure to visit blacktobusiness.com/164. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the Black to Business family. We cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to chat with you next week, same time, same place.